"We're heading in a new direction," Marcus said, not even pretending to look uncomfortable. He had that half-smile he always wore when he was about to say something you wouldn't like. "Thanks for everything, but we need individuals who align with our future vision." I just sat there for a second, blinking. I'd been with Novatech Solutions for 8 years. My name's Ethan Cole, 42, and up until about a minute ago, I was their lead project manager. I didn't need to ask questions. I already knew. They'd found someone younger, maybe cheaper, probably louder in meetings. That's how it goes these days. So I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't bring up the green tech initiative I led that brought in a record quarter. I didn't mention how I secured and maintained 70% of our top-tier clients myself. I didn't remind him of the weekends I stayed late or the nights I took calls from Tokyo and Berlin to keep deals from falling through. "Understood," I said, keeping my voice even. "Wishing you all the best." I stood up slowly. Marcus blinked like he wasn't sure what just happened. Maybe he wanted me to raise my voice, demand answers, make it messy. Something he could point to and say, "See? This is why we had to let him go." But I wasn't giving him that. His office still smelled like the citrus air freshener the cleaning crew used. The blinds were half closed, cutting sunlight into strips across the floor. I noticed a folder with my name on it already sitting on the desk. This had been in motion for a while. He didn't offer a handshake. Just nodded once, already turning back to his screen. As I walked out of his office, I could feel it, like a string snapping inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Just something quiet. Something final. I walked back to my workstation like a ghost. Not a single pair of eyes met mine. Folks kept their heads down, pretending to be buried in spreadsheets and emails, but I knew they saw. You can always feel that shift in the air, tight, awkward. No one wants to be the one to ask questions when a man's just been let go. My desk looked the same as always. A little messy, lived in. I didn't have much to pack, just the things that made the place feel a little more like mine. A framed photo of Sarah and the boys from our Yellowstone trip last summer, the chipped blue coffee mug with the Colorado Rockies logo, and the brushed steel plaque from the Green Tech Initiative. "Outstanding leadership," it read. That one stung a bit. I slipped it into my bag. Behind me, chairs creaked and keyboards clicked. The air felt stale. I took a last look around. The fake plant I always joked about watering, the whiteboard still marked with notes from the Monday morning huddle I'd led. It was all staying behind. None of it mattered now. HR showed up right on cue, Stephanie, the younger rep with nervous hands and eyes that flickered too fast. She had a folder and a clipboard. Told me she'd walk me through the exit process. "We'll need your badge, company phone, and laptop," she said, like it was routine. I guess it was. I handed them over without a word. Her voice softened. "I just want to say, we all know how much you did for this place. Some of us, anyway." I nodded. "Thanks, Stephanie." She handed me a sheet with the link to the exit survey, like my opinion still counted. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or crumple it up, so I just folded it and stuffed it in the side pocket of my bag. "Best wishes, Ethan," she said gently as the elevator doors opened. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. But it came out quieter than I expected. As the elevator hummed its way down, I looked at my reflection in the doors. I didn't look angry. Just tired. Not heartbroken. Just done. By the time I reached the parking garage, the anger had passed. What replaced it wasn't sadness or even bitterness. Just a kind of clarity. Like the fog had finally lifted and I could see the road ahead without all the corporate noise clouding it. Marcus Thompson, now there's a name I won't forget. He showed up 2 months ago with expensive shoes and a slide deck full of buzzwords. Synergy, scalability, agile expansion, every meeting felt more like a sales pitch than a strategy session. He talked fast, smiled wide, and never once asked how we'd gotten to where we were. But I remembered. I remembered the first office, a converted loft in downtown Denver with busted heating and a leaky window in the break room. Back then, it wasn't about quarterly reports. It was about solving problems and building something we could be proud of. We were a team, not a stack of titles. We stayed late because we cared, not because we were scared of layoffs. What Marcus didn't understand was that trust doesn't come from a title. It comes from follow-through. From showing up when a client calls at 11 p.m. because their system's crashing. From shaking hands after a bad quarter and promising to do better, and then actually doing it. As I unlocked my truck and tossed my box of belongings in the back seat, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophia Tran. One of our oldest clients. One of my clients. Lunch tomorrow. I leaned against the driver's door and let myself smile for the first time that day. Sophia didn't send messages like that out of pity. She was sharp, efficient, and didn't waste time on burned-out employees. If she was texting, it meant she wanted to talk. And that meant she knew something Marcus didn't. I still mattered. 8 years at Novatech had taught me a lot. But more than that, it had shown me what relationships looked like when they were real. You don't just delete that overnight. And Marcus? He'd learn that soon enough. By the time the sun dipped low over the trees in my backyard, my phone was buzzing non-stop. At first it was just Sophia, then 2 more messages came in while I was fixing a sandwich. Then 5 more. By the time I sat down on the porch with a glass of Cabernet, Sarah's favorite from that Napa trip a few years back, it was a steady stream. They were clients. Names I knew as well as I knew my own family. Folks I'd spoken to after their kids were born or when their servers crashed during Thanksgiving weekend. People who had called me when budgets were tight or markets dipped and just needed a voice of reason to talk them through the chaos. Now, they were all reaching out, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. Hey Ethan, heard something strange, are you no longer with Nova? Who's this new guy on our account? Doesn't return emails. Can we talk tomorrow? Need some context before we move forward. I hadn't said a word to anyone. Not one call, not one email. I hadn't posted about my departure or tried to stir anything up. I was still trying to process it myself. But the calls came anyway. Not because I chased them, but because when people trust you, they notice when you're suddenly not there. I sat back in my rocking chair, listening to the cicadas buzz in the trees. The porch light clicked on automatically. The house creaked softly behind me. The wine was smooth and warm. Marcus never got it. To him, a client was a number in a quarterly report. A renewal percentage. An upsell opportunity. He looked at graphs, I looked people in the eye. He talked about streamlining accounts, I remembered birthdays. That's what built Novatech. Not his buzzwords or strategy decks, but real connections. Ones that didn't vanish when your badge stopped working. That's the thing about relationships, they ripple. And when you drop the wrong stone in the water, you don't control where the waves end up. Turns out, they were headed my way. The next morning, I saw the name Olivia Martinez in my inbox. Director of Apex Innovations. The subject line read, "Let's talk." The message was short and to the point. I've heard about Novatech. Let's discuss opportunities. Are you available this week? I raised an eyebrow. Olivia wasn't the type to send emails lightly. We had met several times at technology summits and roundtable discussions with clients. She was a smart woman. She could read people in less than 5 seconds. I had always respected her for how she conducted herself, calm, prepared, and to the point. I replied immediately. We agreed to meet that afternoon. Neutral territory, a small cafe on the south side of town with good espresso and outdoor seating. Nothing that screamed corporate intrigue. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting under a red umbrella with a tablet in front of her and a cup of steaming tea in her hand. Ethan, she said, standing up to shake my hand. Thank you for taking the time. We sat down. The waiter came over and left. Olivia didn't waste any time with pleasantries. I'm not going to pretend this is a coincidence, she said, looking me straight in the eye. I've been watching your work. I saw how you kept Novateka's clients during the mergers, changes, and chaos. What happened to you wasn't just bad management, it was short-sighted. I took a sip of coffee, not sure where she was going with this. At Apex, we don't treat people like numbers. We build long-term relationships. You fit that philosophy. How would you like to head up our entire client services department? She slid a folder across the table. Inside were all the details, a more than decent salary, a solid budget, and, most importantly, autonomy. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded slowly. You'll be building the department, she added. From philosophy to practice. Your way. I looked out at the parking lot, the mountains barely visible in the distance. For the first time in several days, I felt something inside me calm down. Let's talk specifics, I said. And just like that, the door opened. I took the offer from Apex Innovations, though we agreed I'd start as a consultant. There were still a few loose ends with Novatech, non-compete language, confidentiality clauses, the usual corporate red tape. Olivia wanted to play it clean, and so did I. They gave me a corner office with a view of the foothills. Smaller than my last setup, but it felt lighter somehow. Maybe it was the fresh start, or maybe just the fact that no one around me looked like they were trying to outmaneuver the guy next to them. I kept my head down that first week. Went through onboarding, got a feel for the company culture, started mapping out a new framework for client engagement. No big announcements. No press. Just quiet work. And then, one by one, the calls started coming in. First it was Ryan from Petrotech. Then Linda from Greenfields Logistics. Then a director from Argo Power I hadn't spoken to in months. They weren't happy with their new point of contact at Novatech. Said things felt transactional now. Said they missed the way I handled things, steady, direct, no fluff. I didn't pitch them. Didn't even try to sway anyone. I just listened, answered questions, and when asked, shared what I was working on at Apex. If they wanted to come over, the door was open. Within 3 weeks, 5 of my former accounts were in transition. Not small ones either, big contracts, long histories. And each one gave the same reason when signing over. We trust you. That's it. No fancy proposals. No gimmicks. Soon after, I got a call from Novatech's executive assistant. Marcus wanted to talk. I called back out of courtesy. He sounded calm, almost friendly. Just wanted to understand what's happening, he said. A lot of clients have suddenly shifted. I told him the truth. People remember how you treat them. That's all this is. He didn't say much after that. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and looked out the window. I wasn't trying to tear anything down. I was just building something better. I was halfway through reviewing a rollout timeline when I got the first call. It was from a client who'd recently signed over from Novatech. He sounded frustrated, said they were having trouble getting full access to their data exports. Technical delays, Novatech claimed. Said it might take up to 10 business days. That was strange. Over the next few days, more clients called in with the same issue. Files were suddenly incomplete, formats incompatible, account handoffs delayed without explanation. Nothing illegal, just messy. Purposefully messy. It didn't sit right with me. At Apex, we'd gone out of our way to make the transition easy, dedicated onboarding teams, clear documentation, a welcome kit that spelled out every step. I'd personally worked on the checklist to ensure nobody felt lost in the shuffle. Now, here were clients being held hostage by roadblocks that didn't make sense. I looped in Olivia and our legal team. We walked through each complaint, keeping meticulous notes. Every call was logged. Every support ticket forwarded. We weren't out to start a war, but we weren't going to sit on our hands either. We sent out a transparency statement to all new clients, simple language, clear expectations. You have the right to your data, and we will support you in accessing it. Nothing flashy, just facts. We even added a temporary support hotline just for onboarding questions. It worked. Clients appreciated the directness. They started talking, on LinkedIn, in forums, over coffee with colleagues. Word spread, Apex wasn't just easier to work with, it was built on trust. A local tech magazine picked up the buzz and ran a short piece about quiet shifts in client loyalty. It mentioned Apex. It didn't mention Novatech by name, but the undertone was clear. I sat in my office that night and looked over the growing list of transitioned accounts. Not stolen. Not pressured. Just, walked over, on their own. Marcus had underestimated how fast a reputation can turn. He'd put his chips on efficiency. I'd bet on relationships. Looks like I made the right call. 6 months went by faster than I expected. Apex Innovations didn't just grow, we flourished. The client engagement division, once an idea sketched on a napkin with Olivia at that cafe, had become the company's backbone. We weren't chasing numbers. We were building something real. Calls came in daily from folks tired of being handled like accounts instead of people. They wanted relationships, not check-ins. We gave them that. And Novatech. They kept pushing numbers, cutting corners, chasing margins. But something was missing, something they'd written off the day they showed me the door. Trust. Loyalty. Connection. One Tuesday morning, Olivia called me into her office. She slid a folder across the table and gave me a look that said everything before she spoke a word. They want to talk, she said. Novatech is bored. I opened the folder. It was an acquisition proposal. Revenue was down. Client retention had plummeted. Layoffs were rumored. They wanted a way out, and we were it. We spent weeks going through the details, quietly. Olivia handled the big picture negotiations. I worked with the integration team to plan how we bring the two cultures together without losing what made Apex special. It wasn't about gloating or settling scores. It was about doing it right. When the deal closed, there wasn't a press conference. No fanfare. Just a notice to staff and a simple message to clients, same values. Better future. A few days later, I walked through the doors of the old Novatech building. It felt strange at first, familiar walls, familiar faces, but something had shifted. I stood in front of the team in the same conference room where I'd once been let go. Some of you know me, I said. Some of you don't. But here's what I want you to understand, we're not just here to sell. We're here to build lasting partnerships, grounded in trust and mutual respect. No slides. No mission statement. Just truth. That's how we built Apex. And now, that's how we'd rebuild Novatech. Together.